Welcome to Know What I Mean. My name's George.
My name's Oscar. Yeah, I was literally just reflecting on how this episode's left me feeling more energized than when I started. I've had, quite a long one, quite a long day. And yeah, it's just like, it was really, really fun. And it felt like, even though we went off on tangents, it felt quite strung together. Like it was quite, it kind of how, I'm like imagining kind of, if you make like, what are they like? I should probably know the name of these things before I actually try and describe them. But you, if you get, all right, I don't eat fish, but fish cakes. If you make fish cakes, then you really want to get that balance of when like they hold together. So if they're being fried, they're not just crumbling everywhere, because then that's really disappointing. And this episode kind of feels like when they're holding together, like you've got these different bits and you blended them up. And you've made this like funny little kind of burger
patty
shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're frying them up and it just somehow hangs together and you're like, oh, sick. That's good. Don't quite know what I did.
That is my favorite analogy of the whole podcast ever.
So it feels like that.
This podcast is like a good fish cake.
Said by two vegans.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I had a really good time with this episode as well. It felt like a nice cohesive thing, like a nice little, dare I say, fish cake of of conversation. And I felt like we explored the ideas in this quote quite well and talked about it from some different angles. And yeah, hopefully it's fun to listen to, and maybe you hear some ideas that you haven't heard before, or it's things that you've heard but just said in a different way. And like, this is sort of things that me and Oscar have talked about a lot in other ways before. But like you're saying, like, I'm feeling energized after doing it anyway, because it's not necessarily about having more information and data. It's just really nice to reflect on certain principles and certain truths that can be easy to forget, and just to have a little refresher and see them from a different perspective, which can kind of reinvigorate you to live through those principles more in your life and just feel better now anyway. So yeah, great episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Let's get into it. So the quote for this week is from Eleanor Roosevelt, and it is, "If life were predictable, it would cease to be life and be without flavor." So I think the real core of this quote, how I see it, is you have this feeling that you want life to be predictable. That's constantly what we're doing, is trying to realize our dreams and our desires for how we think the world should be, how we want our life to look, the people we want around us, how much money we want to have, whatever it is. We're trying to make things predictable and bend the universe to our will, really. Even maybe you don't think about it like that, but essentially you are, just by doing your job or hanging out with your friends. You're really and making plans to do things, like you're really trying to turn a chaotic world and something that's full of randomness and chance and other people's wishes conflicting with your own, and really trying to kind of bend that to be just how you want it to be. And that's just something inherent with being alive. And what can happen from that is you kind of curse that chaos, because if you spend all of your time trying to do something, bring order, then what you're saying is, this is your adversary, is the chaos. Like, this is the problem. The problem is that shit keeps going wrong. I make plans and it doesn't work, or, I wanted to do this and it didn't happen, or this random shit happened. I randomly broke my arm and now I can't work. Like, all of this stuff. So what happens is you build up this like nemesis, this thing of chaos, and that being this evil thing that just is messing up your plans all the time. And it's really easy to get into that mentality. But I think what this quote is really saying at its core is to embrace that chaos and realize that chaos is what gives you something to do. that is why that you can create order. You do need that chaos, because if you really start to think about it, about how life would be if everything was just perfectly predictable, things would get boring really quickly. It may not seem like it, but if you just imagine like, okay, could plan everything perfectly, it all goes right, even down to like everything people say, everyone in your life, every single thing that that person does is exactly predictable, exactly what they're going to say, exactly what they're going to do. You choose the exact food you have every single time. You never go to a restaurant, they don't have it, so you have to order some random thing that you never would have tried before. All of that chaos is just out of the system, and everything's just completely predictable. There's no reason to have any goals because you just could have it instantly. And this does take the flavor out of life to do that. And I mean, it's, you know, it's not something that you can actually do, but in this striving to do it, it's very easy to feel like the chaos is the adversary, when actually it's kind of a partner with you, and that it's this dance between order and chaos which is life, and they're both necessary to have, you know, all the amazing things and experiences that arise, and all of the bad experiences that arise as well. But they're partners that dance together, that both need each other, rather than these being two adversaries. So that's really the core of the quote and what I got from it. Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I really like that image of this kind of, well, it makes me think of people as well, you know, and you talked about a dance between kind of chaos and order, and how you can really see that with people that complement each other very well in character. You know, you've quite often got someone who's very, very free, very spontaneous, very open, and, you know, super flexible, but to the degree where things are kind of going wrong quite a lot for them because they're so unable to kind of order their life. And then on the other side, you've got someone who's very rigid, planned, organized to a T, and that kind of spark of existence that really gives the flavor isn't really there, and they need each other to it's the chemistry between them that actually creates this, I guess, an interesting existence. And I think it is interesting that I feel like that's a truth that is, you know, that really is the case, in that we do need opposites and we need this chemistry and this dance going on. And yet there is some part of us that believes that if we could just get exactly what we want when we want it, that would make us happy, you know. And it's like, actually the image that again is kind of coming to mind is like suburban America, super green cut grass, and like, you know, some like dad in their like white shorts with their New Balance on, and like everything is like super predictable, exactly as it's supposed to be, and like how fucking plastic the whole thing is, you know. And this is a fictitious character in my head because I've never met anyone like that, but that's kind of, that's something that comes to mind. Is, what's that TV show? It's called Happy Place, or is that another that might be a podcast, but it's that TV show where it's like the devil actually created hell but made it look like heaven. So yeah, made this perfect suburbia where everything's perfect, but actually the perfection in itself is hellish, you know, because it's so kind of sickly in a way. That's not the full story, but that also came to mind as well. So yeah, no, I really like that kind of imagery, and the fact that we don't always see that that's what we need is chaos, unpredictability, you know, the car breaking down, that person coming into your life and really disrupting all your plans, you not getting on that course, whatever it might be. We might not see that, but then when you actually talk to people, you know, it's like it's so often. In fact, I was having a conversation today with a woman, Janet. She was talking about how she got into teaching in a primary school through pressure from her parents. You know, her parents were saying, you need to get a real job. This was like in the 60s. You need to get a real job. She wanted to do art, but they were kind of really pressuring her into getting a kind of real job. So she did teacher training. And the first few years, she really found it very difficult, and it's not what she wanted to do, but it actually, she really grew to love it. And she kind of found her calling doing it, and ended up doing it for 30 years, you know. And it was like the opposite of what she would have planned for herself. Like, it really wasn't suited to her initially, but it's like, it ended up being this kind of this thing that she fell in love with over time, you know, and that was a totally unpredictable event. Yeah, so no, I find that very interesting, that it's something that we need, we don't necessarily want, but it is the kind of chemical reaction that makes life what it is, and it makes it worth living and interesting. And
well, I think it's natural that we will, you know, see it as the enemy, because we're always fighting on the side of order. So like it is kind of our enemy, you know. I think of it as like say imagine you're going to watch a boxing match, and you've got, say, like the guy in the blue corner is the person you're supporting. You really want them to win. In order for that to be a really meaningful win, you need it to be against someone who's a really badass opponent who might beat them. Like you don't want it to be the opponent just doesn't show up and then this guy in the blue corner wins by default. That's because then anyone could have done it. There's nothing to it. It's just meaningless because they haven't fought. They haven't done anything to deserve that win. And it's like, you know, you want that person that they're fighting to be as good as, or even ideally you want them to be better. You want them to be fighting someone who's better than them, and for them to somehow triumph against the odds. Like that is the most amazing story, you know, in so many contexts. That is really the story, like the story of the underdog. And that is kind of what we're all fighting is, you know, the chaos of the universe, which is gonna, you know, inevitably just, you know, with time in there as well, is gonna win. But it is to be like, let me just go all out. Let me like live and really fight my fight as well as I can. And you may be the underdog, but you're going to have lots of moments of triumph throughout your life, and lots of these incredible things that you do that were tricky and everything went wrong, but you somehow managed to make it work. And you can just have these triumphs throughout your life. And that is, you know, a beautiful thing. And it's made meaningful by the fact that it can be fucking hard to do. And you can have lots of shit that goes wrong, and times where, you know, it goes wrong and you're not really able to get on top of it. Like it kind of just beats you down, and then you're kind of feeling crap, and then other things don't go well. And like it can get, you know, very dark. And there's some people who have to deal with just unmanageable levels of chaos, where their attempts to bring any sort of predictability and order and happiness to it can be very, very hard. And, you know, it's definitely going to range person to person based on their attributes and based on their situation, how much they can triumph against the chaos, just based on their power and the amount of chaos surrounding them. But there are always opportunities to have some sort of triumphs, I think.
It makes me think of a friend was talking about the other day, you know, seeking normality and seeking order, as we all do to an extent. But I think, as you were saying there, it's like, you know, depending on your conditions, the degree of chaos that you're fighting like varies also. But also, like, you know, what because I don't entirely think that we are always on the side of order. If you would say chaos is, well, I guess we're kind of interchanging chaos with unpredictability or spontaneousness, right? And there are times, obviously, when we are attracted to that. And I think if we kind of stick with this imagery of this play that's going on between these two sort of forces of order and chaos, and the kind of chaos is always eroding order, and the order keeps on needing to be built up, and it's being constantly eroded. And I was thinking, you know, just talking to my friend, you know, about like that, actually, say your experience growing up, you're going to be attracted to the opposite of what you have, basically. So it's like it's really links in with what we were talking about last week as well, somehow, but I'm not going to kind of link it. But it's like, say you grow up in a very chaotic environment, then order is going to be like top priority on your list. Or as we were talking about last week, you know, if you grow up in chaotic kind of war-like generation, then that generation is going to seek order. And yet you grow up in a very ordered environment, again, like image of kind of American suburbia where nothing happens and everyone's churchgoers, and you know, it's all very like the kind of cliche, most dead sort of stale environment of predictability. Then you seek the chaos. You know, you move to New York, you start a punk band, you take a load of drugs, whatever. Like, we're constantly being magnetized to try and balance the books. You know, we're constantly trying to get this kind of sweet spot of where this kind of chemistry of order and chaos are. It's like in Harry Potter, you've got when Voldemort and Harry Potter have like shot these spells at each other, but because their wand came from like the same whatever feather, then their spells like clash into one each other, and it's really tense, like where Voldemort's is kind of winning and these different colored lights from the wands are like battling each other, and you want it where it's like this tug of war that's going on, and it hits somewhere in the middle, but there's one is beating the other and then the other's and you kind of want your entire life in a way to be a never-ending battle between order and chaos. That's kind of, and I think if you imagine like, so this like wand fight, there's a certain point where you want this battle to be taking place in. You don't want to be like so drained that you're like almost being completely overpowered by neither order or chaos. You want it to be somewhere in the middle. That's where the drama keeps happening, where you're able to fight and watch and kind of be a part of it, but it's not overwhelming you. And it's kind of, I find it, there's so many parallels with this, you know, there's loads of parallels with other things, but
And I think one thing that's interesting as well, people have like quite different ranges. Some people have, you know, a pretty narrow range of what is acceptable to them. And some have, you know, much widers of like, you know, often we think of rock stars and stuff like that, of having, you know, these very extreme highs and very extreme lows. And really, you know, that can be a very wide range that they can experience. There's one thing that's really interesting to do. I did this course a while back, and it got you to do this with your emotions and happiness as well. But it also, one that was interesting and the most clear, I think, was just about your bank account, of like, what is the amount that your bank account goes down to where you're like, your ass really kicks into gear and you're like, oh shit, this is not acceptable. Like, this is too little. I need to really do something to sort this out. And where is the upper limit where you start to be, you know, just spending a load more money and not really caring? You know, where is that? Because most people have it you can actually get fairly accurate into where your band is, and it can vary so much. You know, for some sort of millionaires or billionaires, it could be like, you know, if they're going, like, if their current account goes below 10 million, they're like, shit, I need to like make sure I'm getting in some more money. Some people, it's minus numbers. Some people, they're happy being at zero, but they're like, shit, it's minus 2,000. Now I need to like sort shit out. You're going to be somewhere on that range. And it's just a really interesting thing to notice, because you'll realize how accurate it is. Like I did it for myself and was like, oh yeah, I definitely have that. Like there's a certain amount where I get down to, and I'll be like, oh shit, I need to sort this out. And, you know, if it gets up to a certain level, I've tried to stop doing this so much, and I think I'm definitely better at it. And that was kind of in the course, that was part of what it was trying to do, to help you kind of break through those ceilings, or change those levels of what you think is enough, and when you start just spending excessively, and ideally just not spending excessively. But yeah, it's a really interesting exercise. I'd recommend that people give it a try. It's quite interesting, and it might make you think like, oh, maybe you could change your numbers a little bit. And it's one of those weird things that kind of, you know, ties, whether or not you believe in the law of attraction and that sort of thing. These things I find are very accurate. Like, these things of your idea of how much money is acceptable, you're just going to end up with that range of money in your bank account pretty much all the time. It's going to be below that upper limit and that lower limit. because, when you start to go too high, you just start to bring it down. When it gets too low, you're like, shit, you bring it up. And the vast majority of people will have that band, however much it fluctuates. And pretty much all the time, they're going to be somewhere within that. And it's going to be the same with things like how happy you are, or other things, other kind of metrics in your life.
Well, we want things that are familiar as well. Like we enjoy the chaos, or we enjoy the unpredictability within limits, and with what feels familiar to us, so for me, a level of uncertainty is fine, because as we talked about last week, I'm in conditions where I have certain safety nets in place, which mean that, it's never, the stakes aren't as kind of high basically as a lot of people. So it means that uncertainty about money and career and things is not so much of a problem for me basically. Whereas for other people, that really is like kind of getting into life or death territory. So I mean, just to read the quote out again, because I'm kind of aware that we often like go off on tangents and stuff, and it's quite nice to kind of come back. If life were predictable, it would cease to be life and be without flavor. I guess what we're talking about here is I don't know, it's not quite in line with this quote in a way, because we want a balance of predictability and unpredictability. It's not just that unpredictability totally gives life its flavor. I was thinking about how there are a lot of positives to order, even though it's the less cool of the two. Just thinking about kind of like habit setting and setting up certain conditions to be happy, and having plans, having order, like making plans. I've started packing my bag for the following day and just found that a lot more pleasant awesome. To wake up to. And they definitely give my life flavor, because I really enjoy that order. It's like, it gives me a sense of ease and a sense of control that do add something. And yet, like, I can't have too much of that. I can't start setting habits and have my entire day completely planned out, because I start to feel very constricted by that. So it needs to be somewhere in between those two things. I think this perfect balance, whatever that means, of order and chaos is really, really important. And the other thing I was just thinking about was, what is predictability? Like, what is it? Because no one can predict. I mean, it's just not possible. So it's kind of an illusion, really. Predictability, my translation for that was thought through. It's thoughts. You're predicting with thought, and so you're envisaging what's going to happen, and that's a kind of thought-based process. So it could be kind of, the quote could be translated as, if life was thought-based, it would cease to be life and be without flavor. So if you lived totally in the mind, if you lived totally through thought and exactly had a plan and a set, because you can't accurately predict things, but the illusion of prediction and the illusion of control is based on thought. So if you live exclusively through thought of what the future will be, then life loses its flavor. And I think that is true in my experience. If I'm totally in my thoughts all day, then things do really gray out and become very washed out. Like I don't have a sense of life. I don't have a sense of my body. Things start to become very stale and constricted. And so it is that thing of like, thought is an incredibly useful tool that can bring happiness, but living one's life through that thick filter of thought actually it doesn't allow kind of real awareness and aliveness to come through. It becomes too thick. So that was a bit of a kind of abstract like route off, but that was something I was thinking in relation to kind of thought.
Because if you're always trying to predict, and like you said, in a thought-based way, you're thinking about how you want to plan out the rest of the day or the next day or whatever it is, it just means it's always right now. And if you're always spending your time in planning or following plans or doing all this stuff, like, it means that you're never really just experiencing your day and really just like almost just surrendering to it, which can be a really powerful thing to do, to just let go of your plans and to just go with the flow for a little while. Let's see where this takes me, like where I can go. And you might do that just sitting down on your bed staring at a blank wall, you could do that. Or you could do that on a night out with your friends, or you could do it, on a walk somewhere. You could do it in all different contexts, but just that process of letting go can be one of the most meaningful and enjoyable things that you can do within life. And one thing that I wrote down maybe a couple of months ago now that I return to, I look at it every day. I've said it as my mantra for the rest of the year, is less planning, more living. And for me, that's something that's really important, because I spend a lot of time planning and thinking about stuff, and often I'm trying to plan the next day or how I should live my life and everything, rather than just like, what stuff do I have to do today? Let's do that. Let's just get that done. Let's commit fully to this day and living this day as best I can. And I mean, it's something we've talked about a few times, and how for some people they might need the opposite advice of like, don't just randomly do what you feel like, actually plan shit out. Like that should be some other people's mantra. But for me, that's been helpful and helped me return to more presence and just appreciating the now.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a great place to move on to my plan for next week's quote.
That sounds good. There's one little thing that I wanted to add on, which was kind of looping back to this idea of the order and chaos. And as you were saying, Oscar, like that is a bit of an oversimplification. It's not like we always embody order and, chaos is always the other. It can be, it can vary. But this feeling of say you're on one side and there's this adversary, say it's chaos. What I think really is like where the suffering comes in and where it can make your life less good is not the chaos. It's not the chaos. It's the problem that you don't want the chaos. It's this resistance to these spontaneous events that you hadn't planned. If you go with them and you accept them, then it's fine. And you can just take that as part of the dance. But really that's where the suffering arises, is the rejection of things going wrong. And that's one of the major ideas in spirituality in general, really, is about this rejection of what is. And that's really what it is in this context, is it's a rejection of things not going how you want them to go. And obviously it's a weird duality that you've got to hold, because you still have how you want things to go and you're going to work to make them happen that way. But it's much more fulfilling, I've found, when I can actually not resent that chaos and just embrace it and go with it and adapt along the way. So yeah, let's go for your next quote. Let's see what you got. Live, laugh, love. Oh, we should have chose that for like April Fools or something. That would be funny.
Yeah, this is a quote by 𝗚𝗲cie𝗿𝗴𝗲. 𝗚𝗲𝗏𝗏 is a spiritual teacher. He was previously Zen. I don't know if he describes himself as being Zen now, but picked a few of his quotes before. He's like has had a really strong impact on my spiritual life, and it really links into what we've just been talking about. And an area that this is a tangent, but talking about balance with this podcast and the sort of things that we talk about, it's quite interesting to notice when there's certain themes and like a desire to go into particular areas. And then when we've had a few episodes on those particular areas, like for example, we might have a few episodes on quite practical self-help style stuff. And then it really feels like I would want to go into some more kind of like out there hippie shit, and then we've done a few episodes like that. And then it feels like, I want to kind of be grounded in something a bit more tangible right now, So watching those currents has been quite interesting. So that feels somehow now is either yearning to talk about presence, either yearning to talk about some more kind of spiritually things. And so this is the quote I'm going for. What is what's happening before you have the thought about it. And this is a little section underneath it. Notice the difference between what your mind thinks about this moment and this moment as it is before you have any thought about it.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good one.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Well, I've really enjoyed this episode, and it feels really good to record it. I've had a long day, and the fact that I feel like more energized after doing this recording is a testament to my general enjoyment of this this podcast and this episode, spending time with you, George. If you'd enjoyed it yourself, if you'd enjoy, if you've enjoyed Know What I Mean as a podcast, if you could give it a share, that would be fabulous. And if you do fancy getting in touch and just saying what you're liking about the podcast, what you're not liking about the podcast, or just saying hello, then you can go to our Instagram, which is knowwhatimean.podcast, or drop us an email, which is in the description for this episode. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.